Evet, kıymetli misafir.
Distinguished guests and distinguished participants, I would like to welcome you all with gratitude on behalf of Ministry of Energy. I am Murat Zekeriya Aydın, and I am General Manager of General Directorate of Energy Affairs, and I would like to congratulate everyone in this organization. Such organizations are very difficult, and besides achieving this, you have the participation of public and private institutions, and in order to improve their relationships, there is a great contribution in terms of this mutual dialogue. So I would like to thank them, and the best moderator is the one who is speaking the less. So I would like to start our session with Tolga Krell. He is head of finance department for project financement. He has a great resume. In fact, born in 1975, graduate of Middle East Technical University, Industrial Engineering, and he started his business life right after graduation, and he has MBA in Bosphorus University, and since 2006 he is working in İş Bankası, and he was deputy head of department and head of department for monitoring, and right now he is working in Industrial Development Bank of Turkey as head of finance department. Now he will be talking from his perspective, and he will share his valuable evaluations. You have 10 to 15 minutes, so we have such a limitations if you excuse us, and I believe that the participants have some questions also for you in the end. Thank you very much, distinguished chair, and I would like to welcome you all. I would like to talk about Industrial Development Bank of Turkey, and I believe that we need to do some advertisement for our institution. In World Bank, they have capital, and current capital, we know that 51% belongs to İş Bankası, and 40% of Vakıf Bank, and the rest is open to public. And what are we doing right now? Our specialization area is for the credibility of the investments. Two kind of funds. One, multinational, generally foreign funds, and the second is the debt instruments like securities, etc. And we are getting funds from these two tools. And EBRD among the participants, and also German Development Bank and some other institutions are included in our portfolio. A difference of our bank from others is we have an industrial engineering department, and we have 16 engineers in our institution, from construction to civil engineering, and for the industrial engineering, etc. They have all expertise in their area. And the liberal banking fund system resources. We have some firsts. We had the first green bond in our region. The thing about this is the funds from here can be transferred to the renewable investments, and wind power plants are among those point of interest. And besides this, as the first in the world, we had the credit similar to green bonds. We have 5 years option, and we had great interest in both of them. We see that in international area, there are variable options for renewables. And there is a positive increase in the area. And as Industrial Development Bank, 38% of our portfolio, credit portfolio, is coming from the energy generation. And when we include the natural gases, etc., it reaches up to 45%. And right now, in the last 8 years, our portfolio is shaped like this, and renewable energy has the majority of the portfolio. And right now, we have nearly 30 VPPs that we finance, and it reached up to 950 megawatts for our portfolio. And this means that 15% of installed wind power of all Turkey. And for the customers that we couldn't meet in the mutual interest, this numbers could be increased. But now in our bank we have a certain information and experience. And for the financement of the projects, as many of you know, we observe clearly that there's a decrease in the costs. And when we compare in the past, for per megawatts, we were talking about $2 million. But right now, we are talking like in average 1 million or below $1 million per megawatt hour, per megawatt. Now we have an average level 20 to 40% use in the capacity. And in our portfolio for wind power plants, we are using 20 to 40% of the total installment. The decrease in the cost together with this, I understand from this, like it is the decrease of iPhone 7 cost when after the release of iPhone 8. There are some much more productive plans and some better qualified plans. The others are getting cheaper. Maybe it is important to have the future turbine costs. There is a difficulty in the estimation of the prices for future. For example, in the last Eca, there is a 3.48 value that we have. And also, during the meetings, we are talking about the removal of YEKDEM system after 2020, and it is difficult for the prices, and we believe that it will be positive for the system, especially the investments after 2020. The ones who try to complete it before 2020 in the 2 or 3 years, they will increase their investments and they will make it faster to realize their projects. As there will be no YEKDEM after 2020, they will speed up the process. But what will happen after 2020, we will see it all together by experiencing the worst case scenario. There is no subsidy for YEKDEM. There will be an unknown situation, a vague situation. For example, in YEKDEM, in previous times, there were no incentives, no guarantee for buying from state, and YEKDEM was not that popular. And after the incentives, people paid attention to YEKDEM systems. So maybe in a couple of years, we will not be searching for YEKDEM, and we will have a subsidy for that. For market prices, for dual contracts, the investors will have some benefits, I believe that, but the positive or negative effects on the system, on the prices of electricity, I believe that banking systems will revise themselves together with public institutions. And the electricity prices, except for that prices, there is a risk of exchange, the parities, etc. For VPPs, it is not that popular, but from time to time, for the ones who have US dollar-based pricing algorithms, they can be affected from the exchange rates, of course, for the from the fluctuations. And we have some guarantees for such fluctuations as it is in other banks. And for financial foreseeability, it is much more easier for us to manage the issue. For project financement, I would like to tell you some things. According to the risk level of the project, there should be a certain level of equities. If you ask for the percentage, as together with the investors' preferences, it could be 40%. This is not a bad example, I think, but there should be a 40% equity to be presented for us, and some preconditions, post-conditions for the guarantee levels. There is a standard in the market. But what is different from Europe? Well, you are doing project financement, but you are asking for guarantorship. And the enforcement system in Turkey is different from Europe. For example, in Germany, there are private enforcement institutions. However, in Turkey, I do not want anyone to experience such a situation, but the bank credits, the allowances, sometimes they have difficulties, especially for renewables. We do not have such difficulties right now, and it is easy to talk about this issue at that moment. However, it is different from Europe, and we need to have some secure system for us. I hope I will not exceed my time, and thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you so much. As we talked with you, Tolga, and we tried to just keep it on time, and he limited his speech in 10 minutes. It was a great introduction. You talked about the requirements, and you introduced Industrial Development Bank of Turkey. Thank you very much for the information.
Now, if you allow me, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Mehmet Erdem. He will introduce himself and he will make a short presentation. He's from European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. He's working as a principal banker. The floor is yours. My name is Erdem Yaşar. I'm working as a principal banker at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I was born in 1983. I graduated from Koç University, Department of Economics. I completed my MBA in London for 2 years. I started my career at Citibank between 2008 and 10. And EBRD opened its office in 2010. There were a team of 9 people. Now we have a team of nearly 80 persons. I would like to give a brief introduction of EBRD. EBRD was established in order to support transition of states leaving the Soviet Union to market economy, and in that direction we are providing investment loans to private sector, and shareholders include the EU, EIB is one of our major shareholders. And in addition to the European Union, we have some major shareholders from the United States. EBRD has an international shareholder structure as EBRD. What have we done in Turkey up to now? When we started our operations in 2009, we generally extended loans through banks by funding banks, and after developing some experience in some sectors, we have actually started extending some PECs to private sectors. We were extending loans of 300, 400 million euros. Now we achieved the level of 1.6 billion US dollars per year in Turkey. And we are providing this amount in all sectors, including banking, transportation, energy, and also corporate loans. In total, we are providing a loan amount of 1.6 billion euros in Turkey. Our active portfolio in Turkey is 7 to 8 billion euros in Turkey. And in terms of energy, nearly 1/3 of this amount is relevant to energy projects. This can be directly funded by EBRD, or this can be funded by banks through the support of EBRD. We are also working with İşbank, the Industrial Development Bank of Turkey, and we are trying to support energy sector through the initiatives of EBRD if certain conditions are fulfilled. And these banks are extending these loans under our conditions. It amounts to 1.5 billion US dollars. There are two programs, and one of them is TURSEF, and Ms. Özlem is responsible for the management of this program, and it's related to the financing of small-scale projects amounting to 10 million euros, and there are also medium scaled loans program, and BITSEF is relevant to 7 banks, and most of the banks have completed the first and second rounds, and they are making applications for the third round, and we are also in talks with the Industrial Development Bank of Turkey for the third round. And EBRD has an appetite for extending loans to energy sector, and it will continue in the upcoming years. And in terms of financing, we are seeking for some business conditions, and we can finance small and medium-scaled projects through banks, but we are actually focusing on large-scale projects which are larger than 50 or 60 megawatts. We are trying to support these large-scale projects through our own team. As our team is very small, we are focusing on large-scale projects, and in terms of WPPs, we have implemented the Rotor project of Zorlu, and we have also provided support for Bandırma project of Enerjisa at 142 megawatts, and there are some various projects with the power of 50 to 60 megawatts, and we are also involved in geothermal power plants, and we are also in providing support for electricity transmission or gas transmission. As I have stated before, energy sector is a principal sector for us. We are doing our best to support this sector, but for the upcoming years, the market needs to be clarified in terms of some aspects. What will happen after 2020? I know what will happen until 2020. There are some applicants at our bank, and we will try to support investors that have applied to us up to now, and we will complete these procedures until 2020, but it also entails a risk for banks. We think that this construction period is not sufficient, and there are some complications out of each site, and they may prolong construction periods and also licensing procedures. So our banks and also our bank and other banks will be more cautious about these issues. And as far as I can see, capacity factors are a little bit low in the remaining projects, and major projects have been developed and financed up to now, and within 2 years, in 2018 and 2019, we will be focusing on these remaining projects, but we don't know what will happen after 2020. We need to see the period after 2020 as EBRD. And we are in talks with the Ministry and the Directorate General of Renewable Energy, and we actually performed a study for Renewable Energy Action Plan for Turkey. What is the current status? What is the potential of Turkey in this sense? And what do we have to do in order to improve this potential? And it was published on the website of the Directorate General of Renewable Energy. We have a serious potential. Everybody is aware of that. But there are some hurdles and obstacles in front of that potential. We have some recommendations concerning these issues, and in another study with the Directorate General of Renewable Energy, we focused on the methodology of tariff after 2020. What kind of a market must we expect after 2020? What is the situation in other countries? Contribution rates were higher in all countries initially, then they were decreased. We have a new Turkish model called Eca. We need to understand it better. As far as I can understand from my meetings with people from the sector, we will generally focus on Eca after 2020, and we will have some large tenders, and we have seen the prices out of these tenders. We haven't seen the models and financial models of these prices, what kind of an investment is foreseen, what kind of a generation is foreseen. So it is early to make some comments on this financial model. We don't know how much we will finance Eca, but all projects can be financed. The most important thing is the equity. If you will put 7% of equity or 50% of equity, then the banks will not have any problem for extending loans to the remaining 50% of the cost of the project. We need to look at the rate of equity as EBRD. Our appetite for energy sector is continuing in the upcoming period. We will continue to support renewable energy resources. There are some projects that will make use of YEKTEM until 2020, and then, depending on the conditions of the market, we will be focusing on large-scale projects such as Eca after 2020. But there are some uncertainties, they need to be eliminated, and the most important problem for banks is uncertainty regarding a system. As EBRD continues to perform its activities in Turkey, it will also support energy market. In other sessions, maybe this issue was discussed in detail. I would like to make some comments. Renewable energy sources are not very different from other energy sources in terms of investments, as in other fossil fuel resources. There is a great advantage of pricing depending on technological advancements in renewable energy resources. Every decade, capex decreases by 20%. These are international studies, and we can ask when it will be free of charge. Therefore, the presentation of prices or occurrence of prices can be interpreted by me as follows. In these record prices, I think that we have a record price such as 3.48 in Eca tender, but we need to consider large-scale Eca projects. We are trying to create a certain scale, and we need to make use of scaling economies. Both technological developments and an escalated or an enlarged scale are quite attractive for the financing of these projects. I hope that they'll be successfully realized and more appropriate prices will be created out of that. So I would like to give the floor to Ms. Özlem.
And while discussing internally, we wanted to have a positive discrimination for Özlem, so we will try to spare more time for her, as because she has invaluable studies and she will present them. And I would like to introduce Özlem very shortly. We are talking about 20 years of experience in the area. Right now, she is Senior Bank Advisor and Trainer for Turkish Sustainable Energy Financing Facility for small and middle-scale entrepreneurs and for market research, etc. She is all involved in all those areas, and she is also working for the EPA 12 CS12 project for the financement of energy projects. She was one of the members in the study, and I believe that she will also present the points related to our topic. Thank you very much. I will try to use my time efficiently, and in general, we dealt with the big project financements. Like Eca project financement, this is a very important effect for our project target realization. However, for middle and small scale entrepreneurs, we need to support them, and as far as we invest on them, we will have more renewable energies. I will be talking about TWEC, and also for a small entrepreneur situation currently in terms of macroeconomics. We will be talking about those. And EBRD SAF projects, as Erdem stated, the sustainable energy projects is one of our concerns, and since 2010 June we are active in Turkey as TWEC. For 7 years, the project is continuing without an interruption. We are in the third phase right now with different banks, and in the third phase, we have just started. We have just one bank, but we will include some others also. 400 million euros is the limit for the third phase. And for first and second phase results, more than 900 projects and more than 500 million euro financement for the sustainable energy projects. And for the carbon dioxide emission decrease, we decrease it equal to the electricity level of 3 million people in Turkey for a year. When we talk about shortly on TÜRSEV, Phase 3, Vakıf Bank is the first bank that have the contract with us as a participant, and we have some other interviews with others, and leasing companies also in our agenda for the next step, and also for the technical advisory activities. We have some support from EU, and also for the beneficiaries, we know that the small and middle scale entrepreneurs is our beneficiaries for energy, for water, for waste management, and for the raw material. We are all concerned about those, and we are using the definition of EU in terms of small and middle scale entrepreneurs who have under 150 employees. And together with those SMEs, the municipalities and their bodies are also included as beneficiary, because municipalities are very important for the energy efficiency and renewables, and we are giving them some technical assistance. We are creating projects for them, preparing their projects, and give feedbacks for their projects so they can manage the financement of their projects. So we have such a leading perspective, and for the private sector, the branch and the sellers, the manufacturers, the industrial companies, trade companies, agricultural companies, cooperatives, and independent renewable energy investors, ESCO and ESCO customers are included in our concept of private sector, so we can finance them in TÜRSEV context. And for the credit products, till 250,000 euro, we can prepare the financement. You just give a pro forma bill to your bank, and if for TÜRSEV definitions are already included in this bill, we can finance it very fastly. And from 250,000 to 5 million euro financement, there is a technical examination, and our experts are examining the projects in terms of their risks and the project layouts. We are trying to finance the right projects and minimize the risks and take our precautions in terms of those risks. So we just inform our investors if there are any risks here. TÜRSEV is not just a financing program, but also in terms of consultancy. We are providing enormous information for the investors, and without any trade interest, we are giving such information so our small investors can decide freely with a free conscience. And for the wind energy investment financement, we are financing maximum to 10 megawatt projects. Above 10 megawatt projects, EBRD is the address for your financement of project. And at least 1 year level values are checked, and the reimbursement process should be less than 15 years per project, 5 million till 5 million euro. You can have the financement chance and EBRD, environmental and social criteria tests are applied for your projects. And here we are checking if there are any major financial and social impact of the project. And if you have a valid score, we are financing. As I stated, we are financing small-scale projects, and as a result, we have a high number of project number that we had financed. Since 2007, we have 417 projects, and this means that 366 megawatt capacity in total. And also for the investment value, it is 538.4 million euros. And when we check the wind energy in Turkey, the current investments for the wind energy, as we have large volumes for the new projects, the unit prices decrease as the projects getting bigger. And for other renewable projects, we couldn't have that much wind projects. We just have financed 10 projects and 33.8 megawatts installed capacity right now. And the current situation, what is our position and the targets for 2023? And in our country, unfortunately, the financement of renewable energy, we don't know the total amount. Banks do not have such a code. If you ask their volume of renewable energy credits, they can just give the numbers of approved financement of projects, not a forecast, not a limit. They have a renewable energy portfolio, however, we cannot see them. And for the investment projects, and they have some figures, we do not have concrete information. As a result, as Turkey, the starting point should be the definition of this credit volumes here for the renewable energies. What is our current situation? What is the financial credit volumes? And to far which extent we can reach up. We need to identify the picture, clear the picture for us. Maybe with a different credit code, we can create a new credit volume here so we can manage the risks better, and we can just consult and give consultancy to our investors. But we know the current energy market credit. We have 40.4 billion US dollar credits in the banks, and this is for all over the energy sector, which is not included if the main activity area is a different sector. They do not include their volumes to here. For example, a textile company, if they would like to have a renewable energy investment for their own consumption of energy, it is not an energy credit but a textile credit in terms of bank records. So while checking those records, we also check the problematic credit rates of energy sector. When we check it, it is seen that 0.76% in total credits, the problematic credit ratio is 3.1%. So the operational procedures are fewer. So the risk here is less in energy side, so I think banks should do some favors for us, and they should trust us in terms of the credits. So this means that for less warrants, they can allow us some credits, and also they can have the price advantages. And we have a 2023 targets. We always talked about the volumes and prices, and I would like to highlight the financial equity of this. In 2023, we target to reach 61,000 megawatt installed power, and we need 28.1 billion US dollar for the financement of this installed project. When we compare the current situation, it is not an unrealistic target, but we need to be discussing how we will reach this target. And for 2023 targets, the goals, we have here the sector-based, source-based analysis, and wind is the one in the farthest area. We need to invest a lot for that. 13,840 investment installed capacity is required for reaching that target. And 17,300,000,000 is required to reach 2023 targets in terms of wind only. So this is a very good number. We have a large market here and very attractive one. So when we check the other target goals here for geothermal energy, we see that we nearly reached our target. Just 149 megawatts is required. For biomass, 489 megawatts is required. Half of them, more than half of it is already reached. And for solar, 3,325 megawatts is required to reach the target. And we see the financement figures here. The wind requires the most the largest financement support. And when we do the SWOT analysis here, the current situation for renewable energies, I already talked about the credit risk is low when we compare with the other markets. We have international funds, EBRD, and they pay great efforts in the sector. In fact, they are supporting energy sector in every area, and international funds have great interest in our market for renewables. And also, the finance sector has an increasing interest in the market. So those are the powerful areas, but we have some shortages here. We are paying to banks. I don't think that there are no one investing their money for 17 or 20 years. We are talking about just a couple of months. And banks are trying to choose the best project. And for in Turkey, the most important thing is having the deposit-based credits, and our banks have difficulties in terms of financing the long-term projects. And for the reimbursement of the investments, there is a shorter time for having the payments back. And for the finance market, there are no incentives nearly, so banks are not giving credit to us, and we we have lots of questions like why do you not favor my project, etc. But finance institutions for the energy projects, we do not have any advantages to make some favors, giving priority to them. It is the same with all the markets. Maybe next year and other years there will be some project credits for the sectors, so there could be some differentiations like BS, MV differentiation, etc. There are no differences right now. In banks, we do not have the SMEs differentiation right now. And I am one of few people who are dealing with the SMEs banking. Why we should give credit to those people, and even the numbers that we were talking at that time is just reach up to 5%, but now all the banks have the credit units for SMEs. That 5% reached up to 25% in terms of giving credit. And also agricultural investments are a different branch in the banks, but why not for energy market, not for the energy sector? We should take energy sector as a different one, but there should be a regulation and there should be incentives for the banks to support energy sector. And for the individual financement, we have a period limitation for that. For example, one investor will build up a wind vane and they can buy a turbine, for example. But they need more than 5 years to pay the whole money for all the investment. But we cannot give that much period for the payment of this financement. As for the renewable investment, we now have a positive approach, and if we sustain this positivity, we will have a good period of payment, and also there will be an exemption for BSMV, and also the interest rate for the housing. They can have this opportunities for the payments. And also for the opportunities, we have a good improvement potential, development potential of our country. We have a very good developed infrastructure for our banking system, and international finance institutions have an interest. And every bank can have a branch for energy, and experts can be assigned to those units. And for the threats, the global energy prices have fluctuations. With these changes, it is affected. And in banks, there is no correspondence for the warranty of these fluctuations in the banks. No matter how performance guarantee is given to bank while having the financement, we cannot include the fluctuations into the warranty system. And we have some demands on the issue. As I stated, we are dependent on the international fund institutions. Right now, for example, for retirement funds, we have long-term accounts here, and if we can integrate all of them in one system, we can have some benefits. And I think I used a lot of time, but I will summarize what can be done. All over the the country, for the sustainable energy definition is required. We know that for the VAT, for the interest rate support, especially for individual investors, it is difficult. For corporates, we can handle this situation easily, but for individuals, it is really difficult. And there should be some exemptions, for example, for BSMV taxes and for VAT decreases for that person, and for EPC contracts and performance guarantee warranty status should be included to the legislation in order to evaluate them for the warranty status. I know I am very fast at that point and I skipped some parts, but I hope I didn't exceed my time. Thank you. Thank you for this valuable contributions, and I stated that we will have a positive discrimination for you. Thank you very much. And in fact, I beg your pardon, but I am just adding some points in like 2 minutes.
Katılımcılarımızdan da özür.
And I'm sorry for that. We have emphasized on WPPs, and I would like to share this view with you. As of the end of September, I think we should use it in favor if they haven't made any differentiation for energy banking units. But we have a considerable size of wind energy. We have nearly 6.2 gigawatts of installed power concerning wind energy as of the end of September. There are also some unlicensed installed power, but we have data from July 2017, and it is nearly 1.7 gigawatts. And I think that it will be increasing to 2 gigawatts at the end of this year. But wind power has a very limited share in this unlicensed production or generation. In terms of renewable energy sources or local coals, our projects need to be supported by multinational and national banks, and these in renewable energy sources need to be supported for the reliability of the system. I guess until 2023 we have set an objective for increasing our capacity, but at this point the share of renewable energy in generation is nearly 30% as of the end of September. So we have progressed a lot in terms of renewable energy resources. And I would like to briefly point out something else. Why do we have to support our local coal and also renewable energy resources? I state these in all events. The concept of baseload is known by all of you, but I would like to make an explanation on that. Baseload power plants need to be made operational through the use of renewable energy resources. Our system operator, also called as TWEC, needs to make some assumptions depending on the installed power, depending on your installed power, and these renewable energy resources need to be integrated into the grid, and baseload power plants need to be commissioned at a level which is equivalent to 50% of the current installed power of wind power. Of course, new technologies are developing, such as storage technologies, and we are also contributing to the commercialization of these technologies, but in the upcoming process, when there is no wind or when there is sunset, we need to store these loads with the use of some storage technologies. We need to consider solar, wind power, and also local coal in this sense. So we need to have local and renewable technologies together. I would like to thank you for your patience. Now we will continue with the next expert, Yiğit Emre Bilmiş. He's from Guaranty Bank. He is Project and Acquisition Finance Supervisor, and he's working as a director, and he has been experienced in this area for 5 years. He graduated from the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Boğaziçi University. I really attach importance to engineers who are working in the sectors of finance and banking. And he's working in the field of renewable energy and natural gas distribution and transmission systems. The floor is yours. I would like to thank you for this introduction. I would like to extend my deepest regards to you. Today, I'll be talking about the integration of wind power projects at Guaranty Bank. But first of all, as specified by our moderator, the size of financing is getting larger and larger, so I would like to give you some information on that. Those who are the participants of energy congresses know that our colleagues are always stating these figures, so our installed power actually increased up to 80 gigawatts, and a total investment amount of $78 billion is present in Turkey, and $55 billion of that are financed by banks. In the last 15 years, we are in the background of this success story in the last 15 years. What is the place of WPPs in this success story? In the last 15 years, only there was an installed power of 19 megawatts. With the new renewable energy law in 2005, we have nearly 6.5 gigawatts of WPPs commissioned in Turkey. And within the scope of these investments, there is an investment of $11 billion, and $9 billion of this investment is financed by banks. As Guaranty Banks, what is our position in WPPs? Guaranty Bank is financing one of 3 operational wind turbines in Turkey. We provided a total investment of $2.5 billion, and we have a market share of 33%, and local banks have a market share of 50% among domestic banks. And the Investment Development Bank of Turkey is following us in this sector. Let's look at the financing conditions. I would like to list important criteria for you. First of all, currency is really important. If we consider YEKDEM projects, we are only providing financing at US dollars. And there are some questions such as, why don't you provide euro financing? We state that there are some exchange rate risks. But from that day on, we can see an exchange rate of 1.15 between US dollars and euro, so this risk shouldn't be borne by our bank. Let's look at loan amount. How much loan could you provide to this project? We are creating a financial model for the project. There are two components concerning revenue, price and generation. Price is fixed because of YECTEM. In terms of generation, a technical advisor will guide us in terms of this issue, and we are providing P90 electricity generation data. In financial model, expenses are really obvious in WPPs. Our expectation is to have the SCR of 115 to 120. What does it mean? When we look at the financial model, if this project is paying 100 units of money, so we want the project to have 15 or 20 additional units of income or revenues. It can be considered as a safety factor for both investors and for banks. There can be some volatility concerning power generation. Accordingly, the SCR should be kept at a minimum level of 115, and we can calculate the amount of loan. It is at the level of 80% at a maximum level. In terms of equity amount, it is determined based on the total loan amount, but it shouldn't be lower than 20 or 25% of the project cost. In terms of tenor, we are providing a tenor of up to 12 to 14 years. This is the longest duration in Turkey. And we are assuming the project risks. In addition to that, we have due diligence. In addition to technical consulting study, due diligence is performed by independent advisors on behalf of the bank. Technical, environmental, and insurance issues need to be taken into considerations. We also have an issue concerning project contracts. And we also have a security structure. Why don't we have non-recourse financing? It is asked in all conferences. These 2.1 gigawatts of financing is provided during the operational period, but in order to cover investment risks, we actually request a guarantee or security in that period. But this security is eliminated during the operation phase. Why do we need such a guarantee? It is related to project contracts, because in Turkey you cannot actually have a single turnkey EPC service in Turkey. There are different aspects such as energy, construction, and it doesn't comply with international standards. In order to assume the risk in the investment period, you need to have some certainty, and you need to eliminate the risk of default or delay. And when there is more than one contract, contractors do not want to assume these risks, so a security is requested accordingly. I talked about ECA financing. Within the last 3 or 3.5 years, no financing is performed other than ECA financing. You are receiving your loan from an international bank, and they are providing financing up to a certain percentage of equipment amount, but it's not enough for financing the entire project. So we are trying a commercial loan in addition to that, and there's a maturity of 16 years for ECA loan, and commercial loans have a duration of 10 to 12 years. So it takes minimum 3 to 6 months to conclude financing from scratch. There may be some delays concerning licenses, or there may be delay concerning contracting works. First you apply to the bank, then we have a pre-examination for the relevant project, and we are providing you with a letter. Then as we reach to an agreement, then we continue with due diligence, and we are trying to clarify financial modeling, and we are having a certain amount of loan, and we are applying to credit committee for approval. Then there are negotiation, documentation procedures, and it nearly lasts for 3 months at minimum level. Finally, I would like to dwell on main challenges during financing up to this day. What are the difficulties encountered by us? First of all, in terms of wind measurements, reliability varies depending on the project. And if we don't have reliable wind data measurement, we have higher uncertainty, and it decreases P90 generation levels, and it increases your requirement of equity. If you have more reliable data concerning wind measurement and analysis, it will increase the amount of loan that will be extended to you. There are some amendments in the regulation, and it affects long-term visibility. In terms of imbalances, there are some amendments, and investors and banks have stated that the rules of the game cannot be changed after the game has started. These are decreasing long-term visibility. There are some delays in licensing and permits. One of the most important issues is December 2020, because the YEKDEM process will come to an end. 2018 and the beginning of 2019 are really critical for WPPs. Investors need to complete the project stock in order to make applications after 2020, and investments need to be completed until the end of 2020, and this actually reduces the appetite of banks, and these projects need to be financed in 2019. And with the last tender of 710 megawatts, and new merchant wind projects have materialized, the banks are extending lots of loans to WPPs because there was a price guarantee for a long period of time. But now the pricing system will be open to the risks of the market. So the appetite of banks will be lower when compared to previous times. We will request more equity. The ratio will rise from 115 to 130, for example. Price can fluctuate, and banks will request a ratio of 130, 135, and it will increase equity from the side of the investors. And I would like to focus on Eca. I don't know whether Eca is the accurate model or not, but I think that it's the most accurate model for Turkey. Up to now, 7.3 USD cents were provided for WPPs. The market prices are at the level of 4.5 US dollars. But as a result of Eca, we had the result of 3.48 at the end of the tender for Eca. So there is a long duration of pricing for Eca, but we need to talk to investors for long-term pricing guarantee. I would like to thank you for your attention. We would like to thank you for this nice presentation.
Şimdi müsaade
Right now, if you excuse us, we have 2 more minutes to explain something. Those are very invaluable information. I would like to thank again. For the developing technologies, it is not only related to CAPEX, but also for renewable energy sources. 10 years ago, no one was forecasting the generation amount. For example, like 10 years ago, if we say 80-90% accuracy for generation, you will understand what will you generate. And there will be such software, such forecast models. Maybe it would not be that realistic for the people. But now we are facing a developing sector, and in terms of the institutions for renewable energies, there are lots of advantageous technologies for the improvements. And related to exchange factor, we need to highlight a point. Yes, our energy investments are very sensitive to exchange, especially for the machine and equipment points. We are very sensitive for the exchange. And in different energy sources, we are feeling the sensitivity in different levels. For example, in Eca, we are trying to localize it as much as possible. The things you are generating, at this point, we need to take this localization into consideration, and we try to spare the risks of exchange from our generation in research and development centers, the factories that will be established, and Turkish engineers will be working on these centers and factories. So we will see the effect of exchange will decrease, and not just for Eca, but also for coal plants. We are having tenders, major tenders, in fact. In 2022, there will be a new coal plant in Çayırhan at 800 megawatt capacity. And for this plant, for example, in the previous tender, it was all based on exchange for long term. However, now we are trying to decrease the exchange effect and have the tender in Turkish lira. But at the time of the tender, 70% of the tender will be fixed to exchange, and the rest of the sum will be placed as in Turkish lira. This will be our first step in this manner, and we are trying to eliminate the exchange effect. In the first base, we are trying to as much as we can do, and for the next one, we will increase our limits. I don't know if in your projects you can in fact support it. You need to put your goals in a higher level. Those are the things in basics. For banks, you stated safety factor, and I believe that this is not a sector that we can have high level of safety factors. You are planning a tunnel, for example, but for the sizes of that tunnel, for the construction, you are multiplying it with 2, for example, for the risks. But in this sector, you need to have lower safety levels. For example, in 0.07%, for example. And for example, in the morning, I listen in the news. We are one of the most loyal to their debts as a nation, and we are paying our debts, our credits. So collecting all the arguments together in the energy sector, till now, it is still a promising sector for our country, and when we take these steps into consideration and the efforts, I believe that banks can apply lower safety levels for the credits, and our duty at that point is to sit together and in a collaborative manner we need to explain this current situation. We need to have a coordination, a collaboration with banks as the industry. So we need to see the risks together. We need to see the safety levels, maybe to the structure that allows us to work with low safety measures can be achieved together with that. For example, in Eca tender and also in coal plant tenders, in York standards, we have a reporting standard for in international level, and if you can sustain those reporting documents to bank, the bank's approach change positively. But if you cannot sustain the document, they can assess this as a risk. So through communication, we can achieve a better goal here. I would like to thank all of you for your patience. We will have questions if it is possible, of course. I try to obey the timing. At 4:30, in fact, we need to close the session. Do you think we have time for questions? Then please, maximum 10 minutes for the questions. If you have any, we can have the question. Please.
My name is Nick from Goldwyn. Actually, by the end of last year, our company make investment for wind farm, 4,000 megawatt totally. So I have a question for Guaranty Bank. As investor, if we can find the EPC partner, and they can provide the construction completion guarantee, and the government will provide like a feed-in tariff, like 7.3. And as wind turbine manufacturer, can provide energy guarantee. Is it possible easily to get project finance? Non-recourse project finance. For Guaranty Bank.
Guaranty. Okay. Tabii buyurun, nasıl isterseniz.
Thank you.
As I have stated in my speech, in the investment phase, if you can eliminate the risks in EPC period, the elimination of the risks and elimination of delays, and the party that eliminates those risks, if that party is credible for the banks, if they have warrant letters, or if they have a credible sponsor's letter of guarantee, the constructors, the collateral issue. We can discuss about this issue, of course, but I am in this sector for 5 years, and they are asking me nearly the same question, but for full bankable EPC contracts are not in our table right now. But we can always discuss this issue, of course. If there is no other questions, I would like to thank our valuable speakers, and I would like to deliver their certificates by TWEC. Thank you very much for your participation and your patience. Thank you.